Abhi, we're going to kick it off. Could you just tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your beginnings in education, and we'd love to learn more.
All right. I mean, it's never really been that my experiences in education had this one turning point. It had, I think, several instances, several learnings, which maybe even at that point of time I didn't realize, and then only after a couple of years later, when I could compare it with something else, I could actually understand that what's going on. And so, I mean, I'm from a middle class family in Bombay, and grew up in the same city from 0 to 18 years. Studied in the one school, and incidentally, what happened was that this school was a government aided school. So, in a sense, what we had to do was pay 5 rupees per month as fees for fifth grade, 6 rupees for sixth grade, and so on. It was completely cheap. Less than $1 basically per month. At the same time, the teachers in this school were somehow, most of them were quite amazing. In fact, they were in that specific geography. A lot of people, a lot of couples were returning back from US, and many of them had studied in really good, in Cambridge and Oxford. They were coming back and settling back in town, and the many of the wives were taking teaching roles inside the school. And so we had this interesting combination of really low fees and really good teachers, which you'd almost think that they did not deserve. But we had that, and growing up, my experience with school education, for most part, was very open ended. It was never this idea that that let's just finish the curriculum, or let's just give exams. Or even for some of the teachers, they would not be that interested even in giving answers. They were more interested in having discussions and debates. That's just how life was for me, all the way until I finished school, and never had much complaints. I mean, yeah, we didn't have a playground. We were basically just a single building, and everything was pretty restricted. But they compensated that with allowing us to do a lot of things outside of school. So I think 40% of my school time I was spending outside in competitions and I don't know, presentations, and lots of outside of school engagements. And so it never felt like there was not enough. After I finished school, I got into university, which was in a different city, and it was this huge private university. Of course, my parents had to spend far more than they had ever spent in all of my school life put together. I was interested in computer science. I think engineering for me was always something that I wanted to do. And I got into the computer science department, and another 400 people, I think 450 people joined the same department, and then many thousands others in the other departments. And so it was a huge place. I go in thinking that, all right, this is the moment, this is when I actually get to do stuff, because all the engineering I did before this was basically experimenting with stuff at my home when my parents are sleeping, burning old medicines to see what color flames come out of that, and playing with kitchen utensils, and making bulbs and stuff like that. So I was doing all that, and this was my first real shot at engineering, and I really wanted to do like big stuff. The moment I get there, I realized that the idea that they have about what I should be doing in college was completely different. They wanted me to attend lectures, listen quietly. This was told to me verbatim in my first year, that you are just in your first year. You don't have to go out of your room after 8 p.m. You don't have to go to the library. Just sit and give exams and get marks. Nobody even had an expectation that you could do something more than that. That the ultimate expectation they had was, all right, get a job at the end of this. When those big recruiters come and recruit by the masses, make sure that you are a number in the statistic as well. While I had no big need of getting a job at the end of my university term, my parents are fine. Nobody needed any help. I had no loans on me, so I didn't really need a job after university. But they kept drilling this in our heads that year after year. And so by the time you get to the pre-final or final years, you start really thinking that, you have to get a job, whatever it is. It doesn't even matter, right? Just get whatever you can get through, and get a job. And meanwhile, I mean, also the culture of things in the university were really regressive. I mean, until people started pointing it out, even I couldn't see it. But some things I noticed, like you couldn't really question all that much. You can't ask things that were out of syllabus or out of the curriculum. You couldn't point out mistakes if a teacher made one. Several things that got me punished many times, and you get punished. I mean, it was also very strange that for asking questions, you're asked to shut up. And so yeah, by the time I was in my fourth year, I had lost all ambition of doing amazing things with engineering, and all I wanted was to get a job. And of course, I did get a job, and that's how I came to Bangalore. When I actually came here, that's just at the same time. So I left university 6 months early because my job also offered a 6-month internship. So I came down and started living in the city. And at the same time, this guy from MIT had come to my university, and he started a lab over there, which my then girlfriend was attending. And she told me about it. She's like, you have to meet this guy. And I'm like, okay, but what's such a big deal? He's like, he really wants to do stuff. And I'm like, cool. So I took the weekend and went back to university, and I meet him not in the college, but actually at a bar. And this was my very first experience of sitting with a professor in a bar, because that never happened in college. That was just not the relationship we had with anyone. And here he is talking about doing very real things. He's talking about this project he's working on in Uganda. He's talking about this project he's working on with my girlfriend to make stuff for an accessibility device for blind people, and several things. And like, I was completely mind blown. You can actually do this. Like, I thought that being a student meant to not do anything, basically keep learning. And nobody ever had a problem with that. None of my other friends or anybody else all the students in the university never had a problem with that. So that's probably, you could say, one of the initial things that started making me see a comparison between what's the difference between a very open culture of learning, where learning is not just for the sake of it, but in order to do something. And as opposed to what I was going through in university, where doing something was not even an expectation. So that's where we started.
I have some follow-up questions, and thank you for walking us through. That was such a nice journey from your early stages in education, your experience, having such great teachers at such a young age. I mean, I'm sure you had certain role models, mentors, even family members that you'd look up to that made you say, I want to be just like them. And maybe that person was this MIT professor at the later stages of your educational experience, or maybe that was someone earlier. Does someone come to mind when I ask that question?
Several people. Well, I think the three most important people who have been role models for me were at that point of time. The first was my dad, because this love for engineering actually came from him. He also, he's a mechanical engineer. So, but our conversations used to be around engineering right from the time I was, like, I think 3 years old. And so for I think the first 6-7 grades of my school, I was very much at the back end of my studies, because I never really took much interest in school level education or what was being taught there. And then my dad somehow got me interested in actually the stuff that is being taught, but not interested just because it's being taught, but why it is interesting just by itself. Why the science is interesting just by itself, why this history is interesting just by itself. So from him, I learned a lot more about making my own sort of building my own thirst for knowledge and for understanding, as opposed to just relying on an external source to do that for me. So yeah, he was superbly instrumental in turning around my thoughts around knowledge.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to also include Sandeep here, because he's been gracious enough to have joined us. Sandeep, Abhi's experience in Bombay at an early age, and the inclusion of his father's perspective of learning for the sake of learning and just trying to explore and test your knowledge. That is part of the scientific process and the scientific method. Is this something that you either experienced yourself as well, or something that you've seen in the students that you've worked with throughout your time in education?
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for bringing that up. Jim, I have grown up in a liberal arts environment. Yes, my mother did think sometime that I should become a doctor, but that just stayed a thought, thank God. So, being a liberal arts person, and likewise, like in Abhi's case, my father's book business is now 100 years old. So, we were essentially booksellers. So, definitely that had an influence on my life, that being from a family of a bookseller and then having a mother who had done a postgraduate in Sanskrit. She was a president of a college in her own leadership position while she was growing up. So I had a mother who had perhaps in those early days got a postgrad, and I had a father who had just done class 10 and who was a real entrepreneur. Likewise, because of their background where they wanted me to become an engineer and a doctor, but they didn't push that in. And luckily, I went to a school where I had role models who actually did a lot of learning outside the classroom, and that shaped my life. One great example is a gentleman, his name is Gurdial Singh. He planned the Indian Everest expedition. And he's known for his famous story that he walked up to Everest, and when he was at the last call, he gave his oxygen cylinder to a companion whom he thought deserved more to reach the summit. That's the kind of teacher I had. And his encouraging me to go on outward bound journeys actually shaped me.
That's truly amazing. And these are the kind of stories of people that are shaping the experiences of our students throughout India and throughout the US. And we think about the challenges that we face, and those challenges allow us to tap into deeper vulnerabilities. They get us discomfort, they give us discomfort, and that causes us to try and learn and push ourselves. I'm wondering, Abhi, you mentioned, the challenge of going to university and feeling like you're now stuck in this pipeline of just like learning for the sake of getting a grade and hopefully getting a job. And that seemed to be incongruent with how you've learned as a younger child, maybe influenced by your father. And Sandeep, you're mentioning this amazing educator that you had the opportunity to learn from. I'm wondering, maybe from both of you, and we can start with Abhi, is how did you push past that initial experience in university? You mentioned the MIT professor, but what did you see as beneficial for you, maybe your practice or your thought process as you moved forward and started to achieve your own personal intrinsic level of successes?
Well, I guess before the whole MIT thing happened, I wasn't able to push past it. I sort of gave in, and that's how I ended up in Bangalore with a software job, which I didn't really want. But I think once I started working on these projects, it was still a slow process. I started working on these projects. I got a chance to go to Uganda, and I designed an ambulance, for really low cost transport. And I started doing things that were more real. And while doing that, I was also working my job, right? So there was this thing that now I'm going to office for about like 10, 11 hours a day. And then I come back and I work through the night. And on weekends, I go back to the lab, take a bus for 6 hours and get there and work on that. I did that for, I think, about almost a year of being in Bangalore. And at some point, it stopped making sense. It just felt like I'm spending more time doing what I don't really enjoy and less time doing what I did enjoy. And the only difference was the salary. So then I didn't think that much. I just, it was around, it was pretty much, I think 30th December. And I walked up to my boss and I told him that from 1st of Jan, I don't think I'll be able to come again. And there will be no notice period and such. This is the end of the line. Surprisingly, he turned back and said that, oh yeah, I expected that. Okay, so that's how I ended that.
Yeah. But you have to know yourself. You have to feel empowered to do that. And I also want to introduce Cath. She just joined us from 100 Roads. I'll allow her to introduce herself. She really wanted to be a part of this conversation with you today.
I just related so much to that story. It's like sometimes when the wind changes, you just can't keep sailing in the same direction. You just have to move, and it's almost like hitting a switch, right? And you just got to go. And I really felt that. So I started Workspace Education, which was a place for people to gather, or families together, to create the education they wanted for their children, choosing from anything in the universe. So no set pedagogy, but we were there to support them to create the most amazing personalized pathways. And then also develop the idea of community and how we can help each other and support each other in doing that, and pull from the resources of our people. So we didn't have to rely on, so everyone didn't have to buy a 3D printer. We didn't have to hire a 3D printer specialist. We'd pull one from the community to come in, so we could keep it as low cost as possible. I went in as as a mother. I sort of had to become an entrepreneur. And then I ended up being a community builder as I discovered how important community was. And if you want that to happen, you have to be really building a weave in community. So it's been that was a 4-year learning curve for how to go about that, and just to really understand what the community needed and how to provide for them, and make it better and better and better for the children. And then people would come and visit. It's a 32,000 square foot makerspace, basically, for authentic creative self-expression. So people would walk through there and it's like, oh, I wanted to grow up in here, right? It's a little bit like Google for children. And so people started wanting to meet them in their own places. So then I started training people. We're really having discussions about how I did it, and if you want to do it, you'd probably want to do something like this, or don't do that, because I tried that at the beginning and it was a disaster, that sort of thing. And then we did it on the ground training, and then after COVID, we now do in the cloud training, which is actually being great because people from all over the world have been jumping in, and co-learning has become a thing. There's a lot of people doing it out there, and it's sort of like it's a fun place to be around other founders who really want to change and revolutionize education, like yourselves.
Outstanding, yeah.
It's probably too much. I said too much.
No, just perfect. I wish we had more time just to continue exploring. I know, Abhi, we explored your past a little bit, and I want to transition to some of the things that are exciting you today. So can you talk a little bit more about maybe how your past experiences have now informed your present day work with Project DEFY?
So, ultimately over these years of transitioning from college and then doing all of these projects and leaving the job that I had, and then I happened to move to this village on the outskirts of Bangalore and just staying there without a plan. All of these things ultimately led me to think that what was happening with education in my life was that there was a predefined set path, and I had very limited choices. Even when I thought I had choices, even when my parents were not constricting me or doing any of that, still the choices were fairly limited. And in my naivete, I used to think that it would have been so nice if I could just, right swipe my teachers in the university and just change them at some point if they're not really doing that well. Or so all of this ultimately did not lead to an idea. It just pushed me to recreate a learning space just for myself again. So started doing some experiments in this place. I'll not get into too much detail because it takes me another half an hour to just go through that. But we started playing with what happens if you didn't have a curriculum, you didn't have a program. All you had were things and people interested in doing stuff and coming up with and thinking about every day what is it that they'd like to do. It resembled a lot, even in fact, we used to call it a makerspace for the longest time, because it was all of these villagers, from children, adults, older people, would gather in the place, and every morning they'd think, okay, what should I do today? And from every morning, it started becoming a little bit long term. All right, let's do something which is for a week or for a month. At some point, it reached a level where people would just come morning, evening, even at night, and they'd be able to do this by themselves. They were bringing tools and materials too. We had a lot of trash and junk we were collecting from the village as well, and we didn't really need a lot. Everything was sort of freely available or being thrown away by others, and we were collecting that, and people were using that to build their own projects or engage in one form of learning or another, completely out of their own interest or collaboratively between a couple of people. When that started happening, and it looked like a space which has these tools and materials, it has some laptops and an internet connection, but more importantly, it had motivated people who are going to come every day and do something, and they don't need to be told what to do. At that point, I decided to leave the space and get out of that village as well, and see what happens if there is no longer me in that equation. And I did that. I went away for a couple of months, and I came back after a couple of months, leaving all that space and its equipment and everything to basically the village, and no real authority or anything like that. Almost half expecting that the space would not be working anymore, that people would have stopped coming, or tools would be broken, laptops gone, any number of things could happen. And the complete opposite, of course, happened, right? When I came back, there were more people than before. There were more projects that people were doing, a lot of different things. I mean, I came back to see one person had made a mask out of wax for some reason. Nobody knows why, but just they did it. They do all these crazy things, and there were, even more people than before. People were coming from some nearby other villages as well to the space. Tools were not taken away. Instead, people were putting more tools into the space. So we were not losing things, we were gaining things, and we you didn't even have to ask. And the best part was that all of these new people who were there, they had no idea who I was. They had nothing to do with who started the space and who the founder was. It was immaterial. The space belonged to them, just like other spaces inside the village. Like, nobody owns the temple, nobody owns the little community room. Like, so this became a part of their village, just like any other space. So I packed my bag again and I left, and it still continues. That was in 2014 when I started, and now it's about 6 years, more than that, and it's going on. So that was how I think we started that first space, and then many others after that.
What I'm hearing from that experience in terms of like being able to scale this to other communities is this sense of the democracy of education, so that everyone feels like they have a part in it. Sort of this distributive leadership where not anybody is taking on the central role of determining how someone should learn or their interest or passion in their education. And then I'm also hearing these facets of asset-based learning. So every child has an opportunity based on their potential aptitudes or interests. They can explore that, and then they add things to the tools and resources that are available. And it's amazing what proliferates from there. Are these the tenets in which like Project DEFY operates today, or are there other things that maybe I am missing here?
No, I mean, these are pretty much defining factors. We thought always that, if you want to enable choice in the truest sense, that ultimately people have the choice in what they learn and how they learn it, then they need to have complete, not control by one person over all the decision making in the place, but a distributed control over everything that happens. So not only your learning, but the learning space itself should be somehow managed and controlled by them. So we decided that if you break down choice, there were two things that were important. One was the capacity to make choice, and the other was sort of the capability to do it. The sort of capacity, I think, came from having processes that allowed people to do that, but the capability came from trial and error and practicing and failing and making bad decisions and ruining things a lot of times. And it was the same thing in their learning and the same thing in the learning space, because you're doing a project, it doesn't work, all right, go back to scratch. Same thing, you make a bad decision at the space, there's a problem, now you try to fix it. So over time, this is in the early parts, it feels ridiculous. It feels like, wow, I know all these answers. Why don't I just tell them? And why not, run the best space possible right from the beginning? But there's only one me, and I'm an outsider. How right can I be? How much confidence can there be that I'm absolutely right in their context? So the best thing is that if we're able to create these democratic processes where people may not have the best situation right at the beginning, but they are discussing and talking and expressing. And as long as we have this very deep faith in the power of open discussion, that we feel ultimately people reach pretty much very good decisions as long as the talking is happening. It's when the talking stops, that's when the mess begins, and that's when there's no possibility for growing or changing. So that has remained pretty much the same even now. We've gotten better at how we create spaces. We don't need anymore a year or a year and a half to start the space. We can do it in a few months. But all that we are trying to do is really quickly give away all the responsibilities to others and then vanish from there, and let people play with their learning space as much as they're playing with their learning. And that empowers them far more than a defined path.
Sandeep,
Abhijit,
yeah,
you
go ahead.
talked about you talked about talking stopping. I thought
Yeah.
I should also talk. I should not stop. So, with that spirit, I have a very interesting hypothesis. Why learning fails simply because there's a trust deficit. Now, when you are telling us the story about building a relationship with people or stakeholders, in your case, it's almost like a stakeholder because these are all micro stakeholders who come in a quest of learning. And the only way where you can actually bring about the joy of learning is where you build a bond of trust. And that's exactly why I said that learning collapses where there's a trust deficit. So, how did you create this bond of trust so that you could actually create the environment and take the learning forward?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think probably because I was not an educator, I was able to do that. I had no qualifications of being a teacher. I never been a teacher or never been trained in being an educator or nothing like that. I was approaching it from the perspective of just another student or a learner. And I didn't want any of that. I didn't want people to restrict me. I had that my whole life. I mean, I wanted to be trusted, and I wanted to make my own decisions. So whether it was in creating the first space, the Nook, or whether it was in building our organization, we kept that idea that what I don't want, many others also don't want. They don't want to be boxed into pre-made decisions for them. So what's the worst that will happen? Let's see what goes wrong. And if I could detail my experiments, then you would see that it started with a phone, then with a bunch of laptops, then with a lot of collected materials, then now funded stuff, which is more expensive, I guess. But from the very beginning, all that we were doing was leave it open and see what people do, and let's see how much damage there is. And never did I see that the damage was more than the need for that experiment. Never did I find that if you let people on their own devices and let them figure things out, encourage them to ask for help, but don't just tell them what to do, they were not making the mess that everybody expected them to make. They were not. It was not going so bad, and so far it has never really happened. People are actually ultra careful when they are being trusted. When the trust is there, they are feeling responsible. The opposite of that, when I see a lot of other spaces full of cameras and security and a lot more supervision, then there is no ownership. Then you always feel that you are a consumer of this place. You are not an owner. You're not a co-creator. You are just there, just like you are in a shop, and you are not responsible for that space anymore because somebody is watching over you. Somebody is making sure. So they must be in a higher position than you are, right? So in that case, then the bigger problems start. Then people actually try very willfully to get something, to get the most out of that space and take it home because that space is not home, right? That space does not belong to them. So we always tried, and we had a lot of people criticize this, a lot of folks telling us that, hey, you need cameras, you need security guards, and you need, well, in the refugee camp where we were in Uganda, they said you need armed guards and you need all sorts of things. And the very reason that they were absent made it a trustworthy space where people took responsibility. It's sort of like the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. The velocity and position of the electron, they both cannot be like, if you want trust, supervision does not go very well with that at the same time. So there has to be a way of starting with a position of trust, and if things fail, then they fail, that's all right. But if you don't start with that trust, then they're bound to fail, in my opinion.
I believe that absolutely. Cath, do you have any thoughts to that? I mean, you are such a great collaborator. You bring in people with such great warmth and connection. I mean, Avi has spoken from his experience. I know Sandeep is building these PLCs that really empower teachers to feel happy. Happy teachers lead to happy students. Cath, what have you seen in your experience that kind of ties and resonates with both of the experiences of these education leaders?
I'm relating to every single thing because everything that you're saying is things that we've been dealing with all the time. But like in where I am in my space, we have parents who are very worried about security because we're right next to where Sandy Hook happened. I don't know if you know, when we had that gunman come in and shoot the children, the first graders. So we have parents who are very, very sensitive, and they're really worried about first person shooter situations, and like, this is America and guns. So because of the security, and they don't want anyone to be able to come in, and they don't want anyone they don't know around their children and all these sort of things. And because we're dealing with a lot of young children, we aren't able to be as free, and legally we can't. And also, if anything happens on the property, I'm going to get sued very severely. So I can't do that to the nonprofit. So I don't have the luxury of having that situation. In fact, we went from having 20 security cameras to having 40. I know that sounds crazy, but we found that it was such a time saver. Like, if anyone had like someone took my book or anything happened like that, we could see immediately on the security cameras, and we could solve these issues super quickly. And because parents didn't believe that their child would take somebody's book, for example, but they see it on the camera and they're like, they can't deny that. So it was a really great truth-telling system. And then because of that, no one did anything bad to the equipment. But that's not the right way to go about it. I think your way of going about it is the right way, but we don't. I can't think of a way that we can make that work legally over here in our building. But I think you're absolutely right about the responsibility element. Like, I feel like I struggled nonstop with this whole transactional element of what I was doing versus, this is your community, guys. What do you really want? And, and that they wanted to be community minded, but the default is a transactional mindset, which is, you have to really build that community. And it's a lot of energy to get everyone talking all the time. And then also we had parents who didn't really want to, they didn't really want to do their children's education, but their children were so unhappy in school, but they didn't really want to do it. So they really wanted us to do it all the time. So it was always pushing it back on them and those sort of things. But, we did create a beautiful community, but the external energy it took, I don't think is sustainable. So what you're talking about is, you want the community to be building itself without you. And, we're experimenting with that now. I pulled out and I'm doing just the training piece, and the community is self-organizing now. And they really want the building, but they can't raise enough money to keep the building. So we've got a hackerspace coming in, taking over the building, and they're going to be letting the community come in. So I'm just sort of watching it now, but they've got their own website, and hopefully that they'll be able to keep going and build up. But I think you've got exactly the right approach. It's very Montessori for grown-ups. I commend you. I think it's fantastic. And I'd love to see some of these sites and be inspired by you and your work, your approach.
That's really beautiful, Cath. And there will always be certain obstacles that kind of get in the way of some of that authentic experiential learning that I know, Cath, you have existing there in Connecticut and in the virtual spaces that you're operating in Abhi and Sandeep. Abhi, I'm interested in now transitioning maybe a little bit to your future, but with some presence in today, is like, I think as a listener, I would be interested in, what does your day-to-day look like? What does the life of Abhi look like today?
Well, COVID had a nice way of messing that up, but otherwise it was, so I think on one hand, now the organization is about 20 people, so it takes a bit of effort to keep things running as well. But at the same time, I still get to actually go and create the new spaces as well. So I try to split my year sort of half and half, where I get to be in a community and set up the new spaces, but the other half I get to work with the team and improve what we are doing at a larger level or from a bird's eye view. I've always hated routine. Cannot stick to something a repetitive thing for more than 3-4 months. So that is a nice balance, and that I get to keep, that I can really quickly change over. But even just working with the team or working with DEFY is picking up problems to solve and brainstorming over them, using the design process and trying to come up with interesting solutions and piloting them. So even the organization sort of works like a Nook or like a lab. even if we are not able to meet each other, which is the case right now, but we were able to work on several projects throughout the year that actually are growing and becoming other offerings from DeFi. So the Nooks are growing as well. I was supposed to be in Zimbabwe by now, but there is a huge, explosion in the number of cases in COVID, and the country is sort of shutting down. So we have to delay it, but we have a couple of spaces coming up in Zimbabwe, in Bangladesh. I have to visit again our Rwandan space. But then there are other projects that we started so that we can create similar spaces inside universities and break the boundary of a university and its community and mash them together and help them work on very real things that are there just around them, the very real problems. Then we started working on something called DISPEX, which is how can you make communities become first responders in the situation of a disaster, so that they themselves can are prepared, not only prepared in terms of how to get under a table in case an earthquake happens, but prepared more long term, that they have alternative food sources, an alternative electricity source, and several other things. So our ultimate focus is always the same thing: empowering people to take care of their own lives and take more control in their own hands and not depend on on outside help for coming for everything, or others defining their systems. Others are very useful, and that help is very much required. But if you're wholly dependent on that, which we saw in this case, when the lockdowns happened in India, people had to just wait for the government to do something, for the NGOs to do something. It was really hard for people to organize themselves. So yeah, several things are going on now. People are working in teams in different projects, and it's like our brains are processing faster than we can probably write, and many things will continue going into pilot modes and experimentation. Just like Nooks took a few years of experimenting. I mean, even now we say that we've been experimenting till now to see how is the best way to do this, and now we are entering into the next few years will be the first level of scale. We'll try to, well, I've not made it public yet, so I will not now as well, but we are planning to do a very significant number of spaces in the next couple of years, now that we have learned quite a bit from from so far the 16-17 spaces that we did create. So that's the next level for Nooks, but the other projects will keep growing, and people at DeFi look at themselves as entrepreneurs and try to take lead of everything. So even the fundraising is distributed, even or the program design is distributed, the execution is distributed. Everything is okay. You want to do this, do it. Don't wait for what's the hang up. Go ahead and do it and see if you can raise some money to try it out. So that's how things are right now. It's working from home is really not my thing. I don't like it at all. I've always been more outgoing, but I have been privileged enough to not suffer like many others have. So that I must say, and thankfully I was in a position to help. That's and even more something that makes me happy that we could help people through the situation. The places we work in are severely marginalized. I mean, there were people being evicted from their homes because they can't pay their $10 rent, and they didn't have food, and lots and lots of problems. And it was a good time to also reorient and think, okay, what's the priority at what point, solve that, and then move to the next challenge.
I'm all about authentic creative self-expression. So this is obviously exactly where you're resonating, and this is where you're having your impact. And I think that's exactly how it should be, how I'm working as well with the people we're working with. But I'd love you to come and talk to our founders, because you're so inspiring, and we're so stuck in this country. We're so stuck in doing things with this structure that doesn't work. And innovation is just so slow because, we're just so limited by our own minds, I think. So I think you're just going to blow their minds.
I would love to do that. I mean, I'm starting to see that every country has something that they're stuck with, and it's just a matter of looking, and then you start finding the mud. But yeah, I don't know. I've started, in my earlier days, I think I felt this. Yeah, I'm gonna solve everything. I that's what I was doing before DeFi. I was creating solutions after solutions. I used to go to hackathons and build stuff from urinals to this ambulance to apps, everything. And it would never work out, like I design it, build it, and then it wouldn't go that far. Ultimately, I've realized, I think that it's the whole problem of this whole thing is purely in the mindset of whether you can do something or not. I mean,
No, right, exactly. It's the power of whether these kids can manifest. That's the whole basis of Workspace, is like they've got an idea in their head. How can they get that out and actually make the thing? And then after they've worked that out individually, how can they do that in a group? And then understand the power and collaborate as a group to do something huge, that stretches them.
I'll tell an interesting one way. When we had just started the lockdowns, which was end of February and the beginning of March, and then I think 1 month later I was speaking somewhere online, and somebody asked that, so aren't you worried what the kids are, how your kids who come to the NUC, how are they getting educated? And it like hit me. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. Because, well, we were not thinking of that. We were thinking of how we can support in terms of all the urgent needs that they have. And so then we started talking to many of the kids in India and other places where we have our NUCs. And we started asking, so what's been going on? And they said, no, everything is fine. I've been building stuff at home. I've been doing this. I'm even, some kids were making masks for the rest of the village. There was another group of learners from our Punjab space. They were feeding animals and getting medicines to people. Like they said, what do you mean education has stopped? It's not, and the whole rest of the world was worried. Oh my God, the schools have stopped. What are the kids going to do? How are they going to get that education that they're supposed to get? Are they missing out on a year of education and learning? But they were probably missing out because they are made to depend so much on this one schooling structure. If it stops working the way it does work, then people start feeling like, oh, the shop is closed now and we can't buy education anymore. So that was a pretty interesting realization I felt in the one of the good learnings from this year. Yeah.
Sandeep, I want to respect and honor your time. I know that you are very much also in alignment with Abhi's point and Cath's point. And, our work in education is to be responsive and to be proactive in our approaches. And Abhi has mentioned, like, this time has been a challenge for many of us and the privilege that we have in our capacity as leaders, but it's also enriching and empowering others to feel like they can respond to the times in which we're living. And so I've seen you do that, Sandeep, as well, in the communications that you have with the many leaders that you work with, being a part of that channeling and that messaging. Do you, what resonates with you with what Abhi brought up and even what Cath is talking about in terms of her connections to distributing this sense of your own ownership and learning and responding to the times?
Yeah, there are two very unique things I want to share here. One, our learning is not constrained with equipment. Now, when I talk of makerspace and when I talk of project-based learning, which I'm hearing from the lovely people here, for us, we require no equipment. And whatever learning we do emphasizes more on human values and trust. That's exactly why I brought up the element of trust. Because we feel that till the personality of the person is not truly defined, you can't actually do experiential or project-based learning. So how do you really create the personality of a person? That comes to the second part. Now, it really creates, like you correctly said, that the people around you make you, as simple as that. So we work on this concept, the people around you make you. So how do we have that influence of your peers, your mentors, stakeholders on your development? And if you look at the way a child grows up, what matters in the child's life is the first relationship in the first 5 years or maximum till 10 years of life. So we are very concerned about that. And perhaps this was the best time in the world for us where we could think of relationships, one. Second, where we spend time with children growing up. I think this was the biggest plus of this last 1 year. And yes, like Abhi so beautifully said, you perhaps don't need a school to learn.
No, you don't. School is optional.
You don't need a school at all. Absolutely. And unlike you people where you are constrained with space, the typical example which we gave the world was we actually worked on a piece of land. We didn't sort of even think we needed a roof over it. So the place, the what really brought the Changemaker School of Ours to the world is we have this arid piece of land which was picked up about 30 years back, and we just grew a forest in it. We said, okay, this is where children will grow up. As simple as that. So it quite works like the Finnish way, where kids spend most of the day in the forest in the morning when they are young. And in the minus 10, 20 degree temperature, you have little children who are playing in the forest. I actually went and saw it last winter. So we work with that philosophy that learning happens with nature, learning happens from nature, and learning happens by nature. That's our approach. And we are really not constrained ourselves with actually wanting them to explore skills, but we want them to get the life of value, the life of trust, life of compassion, life of feeling, and life of actually learning to live with each other. That's been our focus in our way of approach. And like you said, that, even in today's date, I currently work with 300 to 400 people I communicate with every day, absolutely. And these are all teachers. The good part in this learning space is that I'm using the word space for lack of anything else. I would say in the learning ecosystem, the beautiful part of the learning ecosystem is the world is one. There's no difference between urban and rural. There's no difference between haves and have-nots. In the learning space, the world is one. This quest to learn is being human. And for us, the focus is being human first, and then using that to build material, tangible ideas. That's my approach.
I love that notion, and it seems like we are absolutely all on the same page there. Abhi, I wanted to end our conversation today with some fun, rapid a round of questions. I'll just ask you to think about the first thing that comes to mind, and then Sandeep, I will also include you in this, and Cath as well. Abhi, if you had to answer the one-word question of why, what is your response?
Why not?
I love it. Sandeep, you're looking to bring on a new board member or staff member or someone you want to really collaborate with. If you could have coffee with anyone to bring them in, who would it be?
Cath from this show.
Yes, I love it. Cath, what is your priority for the next week?
Oh, goodness. To start meditating more.
Love it. I need to do that as well. Abhi, what is your top priority for your next week?
To breathe.
To breathe? And Sandeep, same question to you.
What next?
What next? What next? This is a question for Abhi. When Barack Obama was a community organizer, he would end engagements with others with the question, can you quickly, for me, describe your world as it is and how you'd like it to be? Can you answer that for us?
I'd describe the world as it is right now, as a world that overall makes people feel that they are an insignificant cog in a large machine. And I'd like that to not happen, that people are very significant even as individuals, and they can do and make significant changes to it, and they don't have to be thought of as specks of dust.
I love that. Sandeep, last question to you. If you could have a conversation with a much older version of yourself, and you've had a successful life, and now you want to shed some wisdom, what would you ask that older version of yourself?
Just keep looking up at the sky.
I love that. And Cath, the last question for you. What small action can you take this week towards achieving the goals that you've kind of highlighted for us today?
I'm going to revise Peter Block's book on community, the structure of belonging, because Abhi has inspired me to go back to my community roots and make that a priority in our training that's coming up for the next 2 months.
Awesome. Abhi, Sandeep, Cath, our student interns, Jack and Zan, I want to thank you all for your time today. Any final thoughts before we sign off for today?
Well, the only thing I would end with is whether you like our work or don't like it, or whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, try something. My idea may not be the best one, but there is a lack of a lot of different ideas. So And even if that is the case, even if we disagree a lot, that doesn't mean that we would not be amenable to help and listen. So please talk to us if it's something that is possible.
I love that. Sandeep, any final thoughts from you?
Let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going. Cath, don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to take the last bit of time for any final thoughts.
Well, I'm just very grateful to get your perspective. I think there should be, a lot of work, a lot more work in this vein, across the globe, because we need to get all voices heard, all voices from the margins heard, and to create communities, a beautiful network of these kinds of communities across the world, so we can all discover who we are and fully and creatively express ourselves, just like Abhi's doing in his work. And so exciting to meet people who are doing that, because they're so lit up and so motivated and excited about what they want to be doing, and they know the deep sense of knowing about what is right and what is their truth, and I love to see that. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. All right, y'all, that's it for today's podcast, In a Revolution in Education. I'm Jim McCue. Thank you so much to Abhi and Sandeep and Cath, and our student interns as well, Zan and Jack. Thank you all.
Hello, everybody. This is Sandeep Dutt here from the Learning Forward India Foundation, who is committed to #HappyTeachers. The story begins with the commitment of everyone deciding to become a good teacher. The future of school education is totally dependent on good teachers. And for us at the society level, at large, at the community level, and even at the government level, till we don't understand that if teachers are not happy, they cannot be a transformation. We at the Learning Forward India Foundation are committed to help every teacher find herself or himself, to help every teacher to enhance their skills and capabilities, and to help every teacher to build my good school. In Hindi, we all feel Mera Acha School. Why the My Good School? My Good School works for the personal and social development of every individual. And this is possible when, with teachers as the epicenter, we build relationships between teachers and students, teachers and parents, teachers and teachers, and teachers and management. When all these stakeholders' relationships are strengthened, we create the ecosystem for happy teachers. We love them, we appreciate them, and we let them lead. On my podcast, beginning today, the 31st of March, 2020, I'll take you to a journey of my good school and help you understand what happy teachers want, what you can do, and what is very much achievable. Thank you. Have a happy day.